Welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's your girl Nthabi, and if you're here for the first time, welcome to the family, and thank you so much for just tuning in, and I hope that you stay. But I just want to say thank you so much for the support. Thank you for liking, subscribing, commenting, and interacting with me as we embark on this series of #Road to CASA. Thank you so much to the 400 subscribers who have already joined part of our family. And if you are not coming back for the first time, can you please just hit that subscribe button and also like and leave a comment. And if you're new to the channel, like I said, welcome to the family. And I hope you're here to stay and to subscribe, share with your friends if it was applicable. And just know that, you are loved and appreciated. And just a disclaimer, I mentioned in the previous videos that you can email me via apcplug101@gmail.com and I'll be sure to respond to you. However, I also mentioned that when you have a burning question, can you also please include it in the comment section so that if someone else has the same question, they're able to see my response and we are able to just assist everybody collectively, because chances are you're not the only person who has that specific question. And the reason why I'm saying this is because I've been getting an influx of emails that are consisting of the same questions. So I just want to help you guys collectively so that nobody's left behind and everybody is just assisted on a public platform, and we can just make sure that we are crossing the finish line together in the December APC exam. However, if you still have a question after I've responded to you via the comment section, then be sure to reach out to me and I'll be sure to just respond to you the best way I can and give you that one-on-one interaction. So today I'll be answering a comment that was explicitly stated in the comment section in one of the videos I uploaded. This candidate asked if I can cover internal controls in auditing and how to basically approach it with regards to APC. But because the content is very similar, this can be applied to CTA, ITC, and APC candidates. I hope that this video will be able to cover any questions you might have regarding internal controls and how to actually approach them, and it can just provide you with some insight on how to actually ace that specific question. So stay tuned. So let's get into internal controls in auditing. So let's say in the question paper, they're asking you to provide professional judgment and your opinion on a specific internal control business cycle, right? So let's say they are stating that, listen, we have a purchases and payable cycle and they want your advice on how to better that specific system because currently they're experiencing problems with regards to that, right? So that is the only thing that they have triggered in the question. They don't specifically say what controls are in place. However, in the email or the document of the question, they are telling you that they will just give you further information on the day, or they're going to give you further information later on. So now what do you do during the pre-release period when you just have that specific information, right? You already know that you're working with the purchases and payable cycle. You already know that you must give your opinion. So you don't know what can be triggered on the day. It's either they're going to give you controls, or they might even say, what controls can you come up with to make sure that the system is effective, it is working, and it's able to just identify specific risks and mitigate them. So you never know what's going to be triggered. So you need to be prepared for any what if situation that might come out. So the first step would be to try to figure out what the perfect system is for a purchases and payables business cycle. So what does that mean? It means you need to go on the internet, on that specific AI tool that you are going to use, and you're going to explain the background of that entity and tell that AI tool that, listen, this is the entity in this environment operating in this country and this is what they're doing. So after that, you're going to say what controls can be in place for the purchases and payable system in this entity that produces let's say they're producing limited edition sneakers, right? You're going to say, what does a perfect control system look like for the purchases and payable system in this entity, in this industry? So you must be that specific. So the reason why I say that you need to explain the background of the entity and what they do, it's because when it comes to AI tools, they are robots, right? So they can't apply professional judgment. So it is our job to personalize the information and the research according to that specific entity and that specific case study. So an AI tool will just give you general controls that are not even related to that entity. So by giving it a background of that entity and what it actually does and relating it to the case study, you're able to get specific controls that will help you to be effective in your response as well as your research. It'll give you a better understanding of what you need to look out for and what controls can be in place to mitigate certain risks. And this is not only going to be limited to just the AI tool. There are many websites that can give you examples of that specific business cycle you are looking for, right? You just need to know where to look and which resources are reliable and up to date, basically. So after you are done looking at that specific system, obviously it's going to give you a list of everything you need. You need to categorize the controls according to that specific walkthrough you are looking for, right? Remember, you really have an understanding of the entity. So you need to get controls that are specific to what they asked you exactly. So after you have the examples of controls, obviously it's going to list them, right? It's our job to analyze it and make it relevant to the entity. So now, like I said, we don't know whether they're going to give us a list of controls or they're going to say we need to come up with the controls. Now you're going to look at what could go wrong. So you're going to ask that AI tool, what could go wrong in the system and what risks are there? What are the things to look out for? So this is because you need to understand what could actually go wrong in terms of the control not working. How can the control be defective? How can the control actually not be effective, right? So by understanding the risks of that internal control, you will be able to answer anything on the day, whether they throw it from review or whether they throw it from the point of give us the controls or what could go wrong. So when you get an internal control question, it's very important to know what perfect controls can be in place, as well as examples of deficiency in that control system. And the reason why I say this is because we never know. It's one of the what ifs that you need to prepare for. So I'm a person who likes to actually identify the problem. However, you need to solve it on your own while you still have the necessary tools and resources to do so. So the next step after you have the controls, you have the risks, you need to ask yourself, how can you combat these deficiencies in the internal control system? So now you go on the AI tool and you're going to say, for the above risks that were identified, what measures can be in place to make sure that these deficiencies don't occur or these risks can be mitigated, right? Because now we're trying to come at it from a point of we have the control, we have what could go wrong, we have the risks. So now we need to prepare for if the risks do occur, how are we going to combat it? Because like I said, you never know what can come out, right? So now let me paint you a picture, right? In pre-release, they just said that you need to review the control system of the purchases and payable cycle, and we'll give you the information later on, right? You are stuck on the question. You don't know how to even prepare for it. So now we have covered the perfect system of how it looks like in terms of controls. We have covered the risks that can occur. We have covered how to mitigate those risks and those deficiencies, right? So now we're going to be prepared on the day if they say, here are the controls. Please review them to see what is effective, what is missing, and how can we improve that system to make sure that the specific risk that they mention explicitly on the day can be resolved, right? So now we are going to look at these controls, and obviously in our file we already have the list of controls that are just examples, so we know what to look out for. We know if maybe there are certain controls that are included, and we have identified certain risks that are not addressed by these controls stated by the entity. You will mention that, hey, I realize that there is a risk in terms of A, B, and C, so therefore there is an omission in terms of this control. That means, remember, if it is an internal control deficiency, it's not only because that control is not working, but it's also because there is a control missing, right? So we have covered the what ifs that can come out on the day, because obviously, let's say it's an internal control question. They can only ask it in terms of, here are the controls, evaluate them, or maybe you need to actually come up with the controls to better the system, right? You've already covered both aspects. If there's another what if, you use your audit knowledge, like use the CTA knowledge that you have, the ITC knowledge that you have. But remember, with everything that we have covered thus far, in your research, in your file, that should be sufficient in however they ask that internal control question. And then when they say that we need to evaluate the effectiveness of the controls, let's say on the day they tell you, okay, the purchases and payable system looks like this. These are the controls in place. Please evaluate the controls. So they were not specific in terms of what they want. They just said, please evaluate it. So now as a newly qualified chartered accountant, you are going to apply your knowledge. You're going to apply your judgment in terms of the way you're going to respond. So when an evaluation question comes out, that means you need to state 3 things. Number 1, you need to state what control is effective, what control is working, and what control is addressing that risk. Number 2, you are going to state the controls that are ineffective, the controls that are just not relevant, right? You're going to state that out. Because if a control is there, but then there's no purpose for it, it doesn't address any specific risk, then why is it there? Number 3, you are going to state the controls that are omitted, because obviously, like I mentioned earlier, as a deficiency in internal controls is not only because the control is not working, it's also because there's a control missing. So if there's a risk identified, how are we able to address that specific risk if there's no control in place to ensure that it is mitigated, right? So 3 things to look out for is, number 1, what controls are actually working effectively? Number 2, what controls are not effective in addressing the risk? Number 3, what controls are missing? So if you have those 3 things in your response, you have effectively evaluated that internal control system. And one more thing, when stating the controls that are missing, you can't just say, okay, this control is missing. You don't have it on your system. No, you need to state this control is missing because it's not addressing this specific risk, or it's not addressing A, B, and C. You need to be specific, because if you're giving a recommendation, you need to convince the other party why they must adopt, that specific control or the recommendation you are making. Taking it like in your client, you're raising a finding. You first have to communicate it to your client, you have to communicate it to auditee, and give management a chance to respond on whether they agree with it or not. So as auditors, we need to recommend certain principles and certain procedures for the client in order for them to take them into consideration. We need to back up our finding. So this is the same thing. I can't just recommend controls if I'm not giving a reason why. So you need to make sure that your reasoning behind that control is relevant. Your reasoning behind it is addressing that specific risk. Because if it's not relevant and it's not specific to the risk, why are you even including it? So in answering an internal control question, that is how you prepare for it in pre-release, and that's how you respond to it on the day, so that you are able to answer it, doesn't matter what if situation comes out. And then just a bonus food for thought, we are going to discuss journal testing, right? So sometimes we are asked in pre-release to evaluate journals, or sometimes they just take them out on the day. So this is something that you need to include in your file so that you know what to look out for, because you never know when journals can actually be explicitly triggered. And even if you miss it during pre-release, this is just going to help you for on the day, so that you just have that template with you and you're able to just answer, that question. So the first thing to look out for are journals that are processed closer to year end or on the year end date, right? So sometimes you need to ask yourself whether these journals are genuine transactions. These journals are actually not fraudulent, because what is the intention behind it? If it's a large sum and it's material, what is the intention behind it? Is it to increase the profits, or is it just to hide certain things that were happening throughout the year and just balance the books. You need to make sure that you're looking out for those, and also ask for supporting documentation so that you can prove that it is a genuine transaction and there's no fraudulent activity whatsoever. So when it comes to year-end journals, that is what you need to look out for. Then for journals posted on weekends, you need to ask yourself, why was it actually processed on a non-working day? Because we know that we work from Monday to Friday. So why are journals being processed on a Saturday or on a Sunday? You need to see also the timing of that holiday, right? If maybe there is a holiday during the week, on the Friday, maybe they try to process on a Saturday, but you need to get corroboration, right, from the client. Obviously, it's not just through inquiry, but also through substantiating, supporting documentation, right? So you need to just look out for that. And then another thing you need to look out for are journals that are posted months after the transaction date. Because why is there a gap between the date when you are actually posting the journal and the date when the transaction actually happened, right? Because that's an indication of an internal control deficiency, a weakness, in the control system. So you need to ask yourself whether there are internal control deficiencies in terms of the recording of the journals, or what is happening. You need to ask for evidence on why it took so long to actually post that journal. Then another thing to look out for are duplicated journal entry numbers. Right? Because why are we having a duplicate of journal entries? Are you double counting? Is it a mistake? Or are you just trying to just overstate something and understate something just to hide that, fictitious or fraudulent activity that you're doing, right? Why are you counting things twice? So that's something that to also look out for. And then the general things to basically look out for is, number one, the date when the journal entry was posted, right? Obviously weekends, after hours, on holidays, and year end, obviously. And then number two, you need to look at the debit leg and the credit leg. It must relate to each other. They must have a relationship. So you can't be putting a debit leg that is not making sense, like a suspense account or a sundry account, and then credit leg you have bank. What does that journal entry relate to, right? They need to speak to each other. And then the next thing to look out for is the amount, right? Look at whether it is a large sum, if maybe it is a material amount, and when it was posted. Because obviously transactions that are closer to year end, that are higher than any other transaction processed in the month, then that's an automatic red flag. And then the next thing, obviously I mentioned, is duplicated journal entry amounts. And then the next thing would be the narration of that specific journal entry. Because like I mentioned, if you are debiting the sundry or expense account and crediting bank, what is that narration saying? How are you even processing that? That is incorrect, right? So look at the narration. It must speak a story. It must tell a story about the debit leg and the credit leg is actually saying. And then another thing is the time between when the transaction actually happened and the post date, because it can't be like too much of a gap, because obviously there's an internal control deficiency. And then another thing to look out for is who actually, if it's payments, who is the receiver of those payments, right? And then another thing to also look out for is who is processing the payment. Because if the internal control process is telling you that there's a specific personnel who is supposed to be in charge of processing the payments, why is maybe the admin clerk processing this payment, especially for this amount? Why is someone, let's say if it's the security guard, why are they processing a transaction where they're not even supposed to have access to the specific system, right? That's also something that you need to look out for. And then if maybe they include a suspense account, you need to ask yourself, why did they post into the suspense account? What is happening, right? That's when the narration comes in of that specific journal entry. But yeah, that's just something that you can just include on your own template with regards to journal entry testing, so that when it comes out on the day or it's triggered in pre-release, you already have a specific template of things to look out for. But remember, it must be entity specific and it must relate to that case study, because it doesn't matter how good your research is, you will still get penalized because you are not relating it to that specific entity and case study. Because that was the reason why I was on LCs for 2 assignments and it was not looking cute, because I kept on information dumping the research and not relating it to that specific entity. So that is how you can apply the internal controls question and journal entry testing. But we have reached the end of our episode, and I hope that it was insightful. I hope that you were able to just grasp certain concepts. And if you have any questions, you know how we do it at home. Please leave a comment in the comment section and let me know what the issue is. If maybe you are struggling with something, please don't forget to email me on apcplug101@gmail.com. However, just a disclaimer, please include your question in the comment section in the video before you actually send the email, because chances are you are not the only person with that specific question. So we are trying to just help everyone who has the same issues as you collectively, so that we can just grow together as APC candidates and you can just be successful in the December APC exam. So yeah, this is your girl Nthabi signing out on this episode, and I hope that you have a good day further.